I'm Andrew Murata, host of the Education, Leadership, and Beyond podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with author Kurt Baumeister. Our focus is on his novel, Twilight of the Gods. His story pulls from Norse mythology and connects his characters with modern history and political situations. Great conversation, engaging characters. Thanks for listening. And by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you took a moment to help out the podcast. How could you do that? Glad you asked. One, you could tell a friend and share links. Two, you could go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. Or three, you could click on the link on my website homepage, where it says Buy Me a Coffee. And by doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 to help me address the costs associated with producing the podcast. That'd be so cool. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Milletto. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. With Dr. Steve Milletto.
Kurt Baumeister's writing has appeared in Salon, Guernica, Electric Literature, Rain Taxi, The Brooklyn Rail, The Rumpus, Volume 1 Brooklyn, The Nervous Breakdown, The Weeklings, and other outlets. An acquisitions editor with 713 books, Baumeister holds an MFA in creative writing from Emerson College and is a member of the National Book Critics Circle and the Authors Guild. Twilight of the Gods is his second novel. Our focus today is Kurt's newest novel, Twilight of the Gods. So, Kurt, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Oh, hi, everyone, and thanks so much for having me, Steve. I really appreciate it. This is my first podcast for this tour, so I'm very excited.
Cool. Well, glad to be talking with you, and what a cool book. And your novel, Twilight of the Gods, is your second book. What encouraged you to start writing?
Boy, the funny answer is like a bad childhood.
Okay.
Depression. Wanting to see the world in a different way, wanting to be able to engage with the world or a world on my terms. That's not to throw too much God complex type stuff in there, but I think that's what drives a lot of writers. It's not to control every aspect, but it's to be able to engage where you want to engage, and to be able to just be able to see the parts of the world that you want and to explore them in the way that you want to.
Oh, I love that. That's cool. That's I understand. That's because then you also can make it work out how you want it to work out too.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff in the current book about fate and without giving anything away, there's some writers and there's some metafictional stuff going on. But I think one thing that's interesting about that is that, when you're actually writing something, you might want it to go a certain way, but it's frustrating sometimes because it's you can't necessarily push it too hard in one direction or another. It's weird. It's hard to explain to folks who haven't done it, but there's a lot of trial and error. About like reading over it and saying, okay, does this work? Does this make sense? And having read the book, I considered the ending of the book in multiple ways. And the way it ended was the way that I thought it, that my artistic sensibility or whatever told me that it should.
That's cool. That's it. And it, like you have those controls. And one of the things I'm going to ask you about is how we get there. So before we do that though, I appreciate you talking about this. Let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about what it's about so that they'll get a kind of an understanding about what comes together there.
Sure. Twilight of the Gods is, I guess, fundamentally a postmodern retelling of Norse myth with the protagonist, the narrator, being the Norse god Loki, who's traditionally the god of evil. And then basically almost all the other gods are quote unquote good in the standard Norse mythology. I subverted or inverted or did some sort of verted to it to make Loki be ambiguously good. I don't think it's I think there's some uncertainty from time to time, but certainly in the scenario that I set up, there's much more ambiguity about which gods are good and which gods are evil and when they're good and when they're evil. I kind of looped that in with a little bit of a memoir-ish stuff about a writer named Kurt, who's a minor character in the book, and more importantly, some alternate history, alternate present about a Germany, a contemporary Germany that might bear some similarities to contemporary America in terms of political frictions between right and left that we see today. So I'd say that's what it's about. I guess it's I like to think of it kind of as a caper novel to a certain extent. I like to think there's decent plot and story and good dialogue and stuff's going on. I think some literary writers would be very comfortable with just sort of spitting out lots of prose that they like the sound of, and I can be guilty of doing that too, but I really try to when I edit to err on the side of providing some sort of entertainment value for the reader.
Oh, you definitely had. And what's pretty cool about what you just said is that there is definitely stuff going on. All right, and I like that a lot. And one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was that I think your cover's really cool, and I said that if it was sitting on a shelf in a store, oh, you're welcome. If it's sitting on a shelf in a store and I saw that, I would pick it up no matter what, because I have a fascination with Norse mythology also, and the cover implies that there's some connection to history somewhere in there with
right.
Not just the Norse mythology. So it really has a lot going on in the cover, but it really speaks to what the story, what's going on with the story, at least some of the characters that are in it and such. And I kudos on that cover too. I have to say that.
Yeah, my publisher did that cover. He's the artist. His name's James Reich. He's also a novelist. And the press is located in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And he did the covers for both my books, and he does a lot of the covers for the books that he publishes.
Nice.
And I think he's really talented. And yeah, I really like it too. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's take a look at something here. You use Norse gods as main characters in your story. What drew you to them? I mean, why? I guess is my real question.
Yeah, right. How'd that happen? Well, I've always been interested in religion and cosmology and different mythologies. And maybe being sort of a, marching to my own drummer, I kind of thought, okay, well, we've heard a lot about Greek and Roman myth. They're basically the same mythology, and that's what we study, at least in America. That's what we study in school, and that's what's sort of most prevalent in mythological references and just in our culture, which is fine. I mean, I love that mythology too, but to me, when I first came across Norse myth, I was kind of like, wow, this is different. It seems much more, while you can find some parallels in Roman and Greek mythology to Christianity and to other religions, there's definitely a stronger linkage between Norse myth, especially as it evolved over time, and Christianity, with Loki's at least perceived as sort of the devil in Norse myth. So, I guess it was the fact that it was different. It wasn't the same old Zeus and Athena situation. And there are giants and dwarves, and maybe playing some Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid kind of got me interested in reading Tolkien and other fantasy stuff got me elves and whatnot got me interested in that. I think Tolkien probably in terms of mythologies really more than anything he Norse myth, probably some other Northern European myths, not much in the way of Greek and Roman or Indian or any of the other Egyptian, any of the other major mythologies.
I gotcha. It's interesting because one of the things that attracted me to these stories a lot are the different creatures that are in it, like the giants and the different they just have different roles in these stories, and it's kind of neat to be a little different. I think mine too could be attached to some of the fantasy stuff that you're talking about, like D&D and all that. But
yeah, it's interesting. I really one of the most interesting aspects about Loki, speaking of creatures, is the way the story about him giving birth to the Jormungand, or the Midgard serpent that encircles the world, and Fenrir, the Fenris wolf, who's this giant wolf that's destined to eat the sun. The Norse religion or Norse myth, or whatever you want to call it, it's very apocalyptic. I mean, there's a definite, there's a definite bad situation coming at the end of time, whenever that comes, when all the gods and goddesses and giants have to fight, and then the world is reborn without any gods, with just a couple humans. So I don't know, maybe that interested me about it too. But yeah, I think the different creatures are definitely, I agree with you, they're definitely very interesting. Fenrir's wolf, Fenrir is probably my favorite, and he's a character in the book too.
Yeah.
So, because I love dogs.
Nice. So excellent. It's just cool understanding a little bit about how you got focused on writing about them, because this is nothing against Marvel. I mean, if they want to sponsor my podcast, I'd love to have them. But
right.
These are not. This is not the comic guys.
No, not at all. I mean, I think I found those interesting. The comics were, and I read there was a 60s cartoon show of Thor that was interesting. Marvel kind of twisted the Norse myth too, and they sort of turned the gods into more like super alien kind of space creatures, more than actual quote unquote gods. But yeah, no, this is definitely trying to hew away from Marvel. And obviously, Tom Hiddleston's, he's great. He's a great actor, and yes. I enjoy his characterization of Loki. But this is definitely, I feel like this is definitely my own, and definitely getting away from the Marvel universe. Though I know I'm going to be answering questions about the Marvel universe the whole time, and probably questions about, I don't know if you're going to ask me about this, but about American Gods, which was another it's a Neil Gaiman novel that was turned into a TV show, and was on Showtime. I think it was Showtime or Stars for a few seasons, and that has a small aspect of Norse myth to it. It's not. It's kind of broader, focused on a lot of different mythologies.
Gotcha. Since I brought up Marvel, I got to say this, because one of the earlier Marvel movies, one of the best scenes is when Hulk takes Loki and bangs him on the ground. Yeah. Whoever came up with that scene, I think I'll remember that one forever, because that was like.
Yeah. Loki's. I mean, I think that Marvel's Loki's a little more. He's a little ambiguous too, in terms of.
Oh yeah.
But he's pretty evil. He doesn't usually come down on the side of non-criminality.
Exactly. Good stuff. All right. So one of the things I want to point out is that in the opening of your book, before you get into the story, you have a list of key characters and a short description of them. So let's talk about you creating the characters. I mean, because you're creating them in what your thoughts are and your ideas are. And, do you have a system for doing this to create them? I mean, are there any of them that are...
I really don't. I don't have any system at all for anything. I was thinking about that, and I try to outline sometimes, but it doesn't really come to much. The best I can manage to do when I get stuck is I tend to like just free write about stuff and kind of like sort of reiterate, regurgitate to myself and type it out like how this is working. Because I don't know, people who don't write fiction or don't try to write novels wouldn't realize this, but it's just like, I mean, you will spend years just feeling like you want to bang your head against the wall because you think you have something and you go off and write, thousands of words, and then you're like, oh, oops, I got that one thing wrong, and now I have to, that doesn't really work.
Nice. Yeah, that would be bad.
Yeah. So, but that's part of the deal. I mean, I don't think, I think most writers, even the ones that pretend they wrote something in 3 months or 6 months or a year, that's either them talking about the final draft that they wrote after 21 other drafts, or they're just not telling the truth. Because
I like that.
Especially literary fiction, it's just like, it's you're really kind of going where your artistic sense takes you, and it's and that part of it kind of just takes time.
You're giving a lot of hope to a lot of people out there right now, including me.
Yay! All right, I like that. I like to hear that.
Yeah, I like that what you're saying, because it's like, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. It's got to be, yeah, I got it done in 6 months, a year, but I'm not telling you about the 1,300 different versions that existed in the last.
Right. I mean, I was thinking about that too. That like when I finish a novel, I have this file that's called extras,
Yeah.
and it's hundreds of thousands of words of cut material, which is probably about a quarter of it. And then the other 75% of the extras file is just me writing to myself, like telling myself again and again, like, trying to convince myself that something works and then realizing, no, it doesn't work. Getting back to the initial question about the dramatis personae at the front of the book, which I used one of those in my first book, and it's kind of a Shakespearean thing, I guess. And I have this weird, I TA'd Shakespeare when I was in grad school with one of my mentors. My professor DeWitt Henry was the teacher, and he'd studied Shakespeare at Harvard, gotten a PhD in it, and he was teaching in the writing program at Emerson, where I got my MFA. And I learned so much about, I'd read the plays in high school and everything, but I really enjoyed learning, getting to reread the Shakespearean plays. And I mean, I think in terms of those descriptions, I write those at the very end. And it's sort of like gives me a way to introduce characters without getting, it gives me a very concise way to intro characters. But it's also fun for me because it lets me develop some mystery about, who these people are and what they're up to. And I don't know. It's just another one of those weird things. I guess I just like it. I mean, that's one thing that I found with this book was there's a lot of stuff I did, and I was just like, you know what? I just like it this way. I don't have a good reason. I'm just gonna do it.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Well, it works, and I like what you just said a second ago about that list, because it does give you a sneak peek of what's coming, and you kind of get an understanding. So at least if you jump into it and some of the names you don't remember, or you don't have, you're mixing them up with modern, some TV version of somebody or something like that, or some movie version. It gives you an idea of who you're talking about and what your character is, as opposed to what you might already, so you don't keep that misconceived conception in your mind, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because like what I did early on is Loki's current incarnation in the book is as a black man, and part of that has to do with what I get into with fascism and racism and stuff later in the book, but it was also very much wanting to break the connection with Tom Hiddleston and the black-haired white guy Loki. That's so prevalent. That's so prevalent. I mean, he looks a lot like the comic book Loki, and he does bear a great resemblance to the way Loki's depicted in Norse, in paintings and statues and stuff like that. He's there's so many of the Norse gods are blonde and blue-eyed, and Loki's very much not. So
now you get the character. You're getting to know the character, I guess,
right.
And it's done very well. So kudos.
Thank you so much.
So one of the parts of this question that I got to ask you is, in creating characters, is there any character that has part of you in it, or is you?
Yeah, boy. I think that, like, for me, probably all my characters have a little bit of me in them. Nice. But in this book, definitely Loki, the first person narrator, is, that's my voice.
Cool.
And Kurt, the writer, the minor character, Loki's pal, who might not really be that great a pal. I think that if I was writing someplace that, like, if you took Kurt Baumeister, the writer, that's the author of the book, and then you took Kurt, the writer, from the book, and you took Loki, the first person narrator, you could, if you want to get really Freudian about it, you could probably construe one as id, one superego, and one as ego. And I don't know which is which. I think people kind of make their own, and I might change my mind about which is which from time to time. I'd say that, but yeah, and I loved that part about this book, that so much of it was in first person. It's weird because my first book I wrote in third person. Even though I tried to write it in first person and couldn't sell it, and then I had to go back and rewrite the whole book in third person, which was a hoot. So.
It's gonna be a heck of an endeavor right there, trying to switch your voice.
Man, no wonder it takes me so long to publish books, right? I think that, and then there are some characters in the book that also, there's probably a little of my brother in Thor. There's probably a little of my dad in Odin.
Nice.
I don't know that my mom really fits with Frigga much, but different folks. I think, I don't know who Hel, Loki's daughter, is. She's a major character too. I'm not quite sure who she is.
Gotcha. It's cool though that some of your characters you do have, because I like, when I read a book, I like to know. I think it is always neat if you get a chance to talk with the author, to say, all right, which one of these are you?
Yeah, I mean, I do too, and I think some writers will insist that that's like anathema to what they do.
Exactly.
And I don't understand that at all. I mean, we're human beings, and we're creating human characters. I mean, how could it not have something to do with? Now, obviously, you make 99% of it up. I mean, it's sort of, but you got to be able to see a shred of people you've known or yourself in your characters. I mean, I don't see any other way.
I can only imagine, because it's because it is one of those things that I would think that just naturally what comes out is, either people that you really know well and you just change the names,
right,
or a combo of
right.
it.
I mean, there are these things called libel and
Right.
like that. So obviously that's an issue, and that may be why a lot of writers just insist that there's no linkage, and I it says that at the beginning of a lot of books, but I think that's kind of silly to take that too far, and I don't think anyone in their right mind can take it too far. People are people, and people have to be the models for human characters.
I have this idea that I've been working on for a while. So you're giving me hope right here when you're talking.
Good. Are you a novel, or what are you working on?
Well, I'm delving into trying to write a horror tale, and it right now is a long version of a short story, and but part of it is I made the mistake a while back ago of letting a friend of mine that I worked with at one time take a look at it, because it all revolves around a community, around a school.
I've made that mistake before.
And he said to me, "You killed me." And I said, "How you know that's you?"
Everybody thinks everybody's them too.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's like,
yeah, right.
Now,
right.
the funny thing is that, he kind of was on the money at that time. I've changed the character enough now that it wouldn't be.
Exactly. Did he threaten to sue?
Oh, no. He's like, can't you just make me last a little longer or something like that?
Yeah,
and
right.
I said, leave it alone. That's not helpful.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out how to write a horror tale. I read lots of different types of books and stuff like this. And so this is my entry into trying to figure it out. And I've had these ideas that I've written these little parts and stuff like that. And without talking about me too much, my point is that when I made that mistake of showing it, it's like, yeah. So if you've run into that before, where you've shown someone and they go, "Hey, that's me."
Yeah. I mean, I've run into that, and I've also run into I don't know. I've almost gotten to the point where I wonder whether feedback is even matters that much.
Right.
Right. Because somebody can give you their best advice and might be right if they were writing the book. And sometimes you definitely get stuff from other people, but I find that most of interacting with other writers, either talking about my stuff or talking about theirs, is the person who's actually doing the work, talking about it, and just kind of listening to them, and they figure it out on their own. Because that's how it always has to be. Ultimately, that it has to make sense to the person that's actually writing it. I mean, you could get the best advice in the world from somebody, and it might be right for 95% of the people. And if it's just if you look at it and you're like, I don't really want to do that, it's not going to work.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And it is interesting when people mean well, but sometimes, you wonder if, is it feedback that's good for what I'm trying to do, I guess is my point.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, you have to bear that in mind, but then of course, you also get to a point when you're actually publishing a book, or even trying to get an agent to market it to bigger publishers. I think if you get too precious about your stuff at that stage, you're making a mistake. So once somebody says, "I want this," you pretty much you pretty much do what they tell you to do.
I can imagine.
That's the way I see the editor-writer relationship. From my own standpoint, I think I'm a bit less like that as an editor. I try to let, and I'm sure that my editors look at it that way too. They're not trying to, they're not trying to turn it into their book. They're trying to make it the best version of your book
Right, right.
that it can be, the best version of what they bought. But you gotta listen to the person that's still, you're still living in a capitalist society. You gotta listen to the person that's signing the checks.
Oh, that makes perfect sense too. That'd be nuts not to pay any attention to that. It's like, well, I just shot myself in the foot, the leg, and yeah.
Yep.
This next sound you will hear is me crashing and burning. So, yeah. Oh, that makes perfect sense. So, who's your ideal audience? Who are you writing for? Who are you trying to reach?
I guess I'd say it's literary fiction. It's satirical. So I guess it's for adults. Probably probably people with some education, I guess. Some interest in ideas and things like mythologies and religions and politics, and but I try to make it all funny, or as much of it as I can. Not everything's going to be funny. I think this book is ultimately a sort of a tragic comedy, ultimately, in more ways than one. But yeah, I mean, it's so hard. I think at the level that I'm at, which is as a writer, which is a pretty low level, you're just trying to, like, anybody that'll read this, please read my book, please. And better than that, even, please buy my book.
Gotcha. It's it definitely has very funny parts in it, and the kind of subtle humor fits in there too, and it's definitely not a disguised YA book.
Right.
At least that's my opinion.
Yeah. It's not YA. I'm not a real I'm not a real big YA person. I read a couple of Harry Potters. And they were, I thought they were, I read one, I was like, oh, this isn't bad. And I read the next one, I was kind of like, well, this is sort of the same book. But I mean, hey, all credit to her with, the gazillion dollars that she's made, and all the,
Right.
All the millions and millions of people who've read those books. But yeah, I'm not much of I guess it's adult fiction. Yeah.
I gotcha. All right. So you kind of answered this earlier with something that you said, but I want to take it to the next step, which is where I was going with it, which is, I wanted to ask you if you outline, and if you don't, you just kind of, and this is old school, but put pencil to paper and see where it takes you, or whether it's typing on a tablet. Or something.
It's definitely typing. I don't write much anymore, and handwrite much anymore. But yeah, I pretty much just start out. I don't, I guess I tend to get an idea about what I want to do, what the whole book is going to be about. And then I just kind of start writing it. And yeah, it makes for a long process. I mean, so my first book was published in March of 17, and now we're 8 years later. I've got to speed this up. I mean, I'm working on it. The new book, I'm trying to get this done a lot faster, because I just can't. I'm getting up there, man. I just can't keep spending 8 years per book. I don't. Even if I get really lucky in terms of lifespan, I want to write more books than I can do if I only turn one out every 8 years.
I understand.
Yeah. So that's, yeah, I'm not and I have friends that do tons of outlining. My friend Jonathan Evison, he has all these, I think someday all his papers are going to be collected by some university, because he's got all these, storyboards he does. He writes stuff out in different magic marker colors, and just so much detail. and I have other friends that outline, a lot of people outline. I really feel like with writing, it's about what works for you. It's about what works for the writer. And, that's why writing programs are great for some people and they're mediocre for some people. And for some people that, you don't really get much out of them other than actually being able to write. It's really, there's so much trial and error, and this is probably the not encouraging side of the encouragement I gave before, which was that it's almost like magic. It seems to me like it's just like you in terms of, writing something and having it eventually work out through trial and error, and then somehow finding a publisher. And it's tough, man. I mean, I never would have imagined when I went to grad school, 25 years ago, I never would have imagined that it would be this much work to get 2 small press books published.
Gotcha.
It's wild.
Yes.
And yet I keep doing it.
Keep doing it. Yep. There you go. It's like, so at least you're not listening to a voice that says, why am I doing this?
Yeah, it's weird. People talk about that, and you really just, I mean, I'm really a believer that you just, if you want to write, you will. And I think that, it's tough because people go through, things like writer's block and stuff like that. And that's very real for some people. For some people, it's less real. For some people, it's really not much at all. Kind of like the last answer I gave. But it's just, I think that, I think I really subscribe to the advice that if you can stop writing, you probably should. Because like, unless you have to do it, it's tough, man. It's really, the percentage of people who just have this great success that we imagine from, writers like Stephen King or Rowling or Hemingway, Nabokov, Tolkien, Margaret Atwood. It's a very small percentage of writers. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, that sort of, but that sort of protects people who want to do it too, because if you really want to do it, you're gonna do it. You know what I mean? I mean, you're just gonna,
Oh, yeah.
you like you with your working on your horror novel, you want to work on it.
Yeah.
It's something you've been thinking of for, I mean, you know what I mean? That's really the bottom line.
Totally get it, because it is something that, and it's pretty wild when I talk with different authors who talk about just what they've done, what they are doing in developing their stories and stuff like this. And so it's cool hearing you talk about what you've done with yours as well, because it's, you want to make it happen. You want to, one of the things I'm fascinated about is what, I know what makes me afraid, and I'm not talking about real world stuff. I mean, I'm talking about characters and stories and stuff like this. But I'm always fascinated about what makes others in a storyline, what makes you keep reading it. And,
right.
Because there are some books that I've gone, yeah, no, this is going, put this away. And then others,
I can't.
And then others where I stay up till 2 in the morning.
Too much to deal with. Yeah. But, yeah, it's weird. I mean, I mean, there's an aspect of that, whether it's horror or humor or drama, that you are engaging with it in terms of, is anybody else going to feel the same way about this?
Yeah, there you go.
That's one side of it. And the other side is, you ultimately, I mean, this is just my answer to everything writing. And it's really an unsatisfying answer, but it's that, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes that rule is true for a person. Sometimes it's absolutely not true. I saw a friend writing in a Substack about, destroying the show don't tell myth. as he called
yeah,
it, that,
yeah.
and I totally see that. But I can also see that, yeah, show don't tell, it makes some sense too. I don't know. It's just sort of, I'm like Loki. I'm just torn between good and evil. I
Nice.
can't, I can't keep bouncing back and forth.
Good stuff. All right. So let me, because one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, in a story like yours, you have some kind of sort of, you have an attachment to some historical stuff in it, as well as the history associated with the Norse mythology. Did you spend some time researching the topics a little bit to familiarize yourself with? I mean,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Um, I mean, so the topics that are, Norse mythology, obviously, and then some of the history of World War II and the history of the rest of the 20th century and the early 21st century in the West mostly. Um, I've read multiple versions of the Norse myths. Probably the one that was the most useful and accessible is called, I think it's called just The Norse Myths by Kevin Crossley Holland. And it breaks it up. The original myths were written in a poetic form that's called the Edda, Edda, and they're called the Elder Eddas. And so, they're different myths that were kind of sort of, pieced together to get this overall mythology that we have. But one thing that's interesting, and I kind of touch on it in the book, is that there are a lot of contradictions, because these myths are coming from disparate points,
right.
One person's Thor or one village's Thor wasn't the same as another village's Thor. And it's very much like any religion, really. I don't think one person's Jesus is the same as another person's Jesus. In fact, very different takes on that, depending on who you ask. And in terms of the World War II angle, there's an aspect of actual history where the Nazis were really into paganism, and they were into Norse mythology to a certain extent. So there's an established linkage. There was this occult society called the Thule Society that was sort of linked with Nazism and fairly powerful in the Third Reich. And so there's definitely some linkage that's going on, and that's also comes out in certain cartoons like Hellboy, or comic books. I mean, Hellboy is,
Right.
if you've seen the movies or anything, there's a Nazi angle to that. It's so much. I mean, Captain America, a lot of Captain America's stuff was, I think he originated in the World War II
He did.
time period.
Yes.
So a lot of his it is linked with that. I mean, for me, ultimately, I have to admit that I see some fairly strong notes of fascism in some of the political figures in America today, and also in parts of Western Europe. And so picking that up and kind of marrying that with the mythology and with the mostly actual history of World War II and the Third Reich, kind of wanted to weave those together and kind of ask the question, why do we as humans keep falling for these ideologies? And it's not all about right versus left. I mean, I think humans sort of seem to have an obsession with answers, and it's served us well to a certain extent. It's caused us to learn a lot of things and to develop a lot of new technologies. But there's also this aspect of it where we seem to be somehow hardwire ourselves to want there to be one answer, one like final right answer. And that comes through in politics and religion most prominently, when they both go awry and they become too obsessed with their correctness. And I think that's kind of my point from a historical and political standpoint, that we've arrived there again, in some ways.
Gotcha. That's thank you for talking about that. And Kurt, we're getting close to bringing everything to a close. And one of the things I want to ask you before we go any further, before I forget, is do you have anything else in the works? I mean, have you started? I know you're talking about speeding up the process, but
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to speed up the process. My new novel that I'm working on now is called As Below, So Above, or The 9 Trials of Tina the Demon. And Tina's the protagonist. She's a first-person narrator in a hell that looks oddly like America. And she's a special counsel. And she's pursuing a case. And so that's kind of a murder mystery of sorts.
cool.
Yeah. But there'll be linkage to contemporary and near contemporary politics, as my stuff always seems to. So
Very cool.
stay tuned for that one, but I don't know how many years it'll be before it's done.
Gotcha. Well, all the best on getting that pushed forward, and look forward to it coming out.
Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it.
You know what? I got just two last questions for the listeners. If they want to follow up with you, where do you want to send them?
I am Kurt Baumeister all over the internet. My website is www.kurtbaumeister, all one word, lowercase.com. My Facebook is Kurt Baumeister. My Blue Sky is kurtbaumeister.bluesky.com. On Instagram, I'm not on X much. I still have an account, but I couldn't take X. And there's a Wikipedia page too, that Kurt Baumeister, that folks can look up.
Very cool.
But yeah, that's in. Oh, and 713 Books is the place where I edit, and that we have a website for that too. They've got websites for everything now. So
that they do. Very cool. I'll put that stuff in the show notes, and I do want to point out that as I was looking through your website and stuff like this, you do editing, right? You choose people.
I do. Yeah. Obviously it's not connected with the editing that I do for 713 Books. That's a separate thing.
Right.
I acquire books and I pay for the books and I edit them. Or the company pays for the books and we edit them and put them out. But I'm also available for kind of third party editing, if you will, manuscript consulting, whatever you'd like to call that. But I have enough other stuff to keep me busy. So
Gotcha.
So I'm okay.
Well, very cool. So let me ask you one more question, and this is just a question I like to ask my guests. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so,
oh yeah,
who would it be, and what would you say if given a chance to say thank you?
Oh, well, yeah, I'd definitely say thank you. I can think of 4. There was Mr. Masick was a second grade teacher that really encouraged me in math. Mrs. Lytle was my third grade teacher, who's a very sweet person. Mrs. Landgrave was my high school French teacher that I TA'd for, and she recently passed away. And I was trying to get in touch with her when I found out that she passed away. So that was very sad, but she lived a long time. And then of course, DeWitt Henry, who I mentioned I TA'd for in grad school, was very helpful. I learned a lot from all those people. I'm very grateful to all of them.
Very cool.
And I'm very grateful to you too, Steve, for having me on your show. This was great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's great talking with you, Kurt. I thank you so much for talking to us about Twilight of the Gods, your newest novel. Amazing characters, incredible story. It was very engaging, and wishing you the best in all you do.
Thank you very much.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.